What is going on?
Have you read the title?
I don't think we meant it to be literal. What about the React best practices part?
Okay, not fun though. Let's start from the beginning.
Jokes aside, this is the first episode of Keep It Clean, a series focused on best and bad practices. A small disclaimer: in this and all future episodes, all the suggestions are based on personal opinion and experience, but we know that there is always a margin for improvement. So, if you have any suggestions, concerns, or personal experiences, feel free to leave a comment down below.
Before we can start, one last important thing is to know what you're using. Not only studying theory, but also experimenting and digging a bit into its inner workings. These are advanced topics, so we assume that you already know the basics. Today, as you can guess, we start with React. If you don't know what React is or you need a refresher, watch our previous episode on this topic. And now, time to play! And here it is. You see?
Kata,
This is.
did you play with Paint recently?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. More powerful tool than all. Okay, I'm joking. That apart, this is a simple wireframe of an application and explain how components are placed inside an application. So you have a main context, for example, for a site, a context for a page, the layout of the page, probably shared with all the pages. Then you have header, logo, navigation, theme switcher, menu items, and a content with a lot of other components. As you know, when you are inside a page, for example, or in a header component, if you start rendering that component, all the children underneath that component are rendered too. But you can avoid that with some optimization. And here is where Memo comes in help.
So, what is Memo?
Okay, I've prepared a little example here with two components that are really simple. It has some props, it has no props, it could have a lot of descendant or not.
Yeah, I mean, there could be expensive stuff in there.
Well, yeah, probably yeah, but complexity adds up. So even many inexpensive component can become expensive together. And how can we solve that? We can solve like that. In the past, you have component. Here is our old example. And that component, you solve that problem using pure component. Nowadays, with the functional syntax, you use the memo. That is an IOC, high order component, that wraps around the function component and do a comparison of all the props that you pass to a component. If the props hasn't changed from a render to another, it uses the old version that has rendered without new computation and so on. If you don't have props, this is more effective because it has nothing to compare. How the props are compared is the interesting thing, because it uses a shallow comparison.
So, Kata, what about prop comparison?
Okay, the shallow comparison is very easy. If you have primitive types like string, number, or boolean, for example, the comparison is made by value. But the things change a bit when you have a more complex type. For example, if you have an object or a function, the comparison is made by a reference. So if you have a new prop and an old prop that have different references, but the content of the object is the same, they are not equal because you have different references. So it's really simple, really simple. But if you know that, you can understand all the optimization. So in this example, we use an array and a function. In that case, you see there are two props in that component with the memo, that is badges and on setting slick, that use that function, that array. So how can I optimize that? Because in
every
that
time
case,
we're building a new one, we're building a new array, we're building a new function.
Exactly, you get it. So how we can optimize that? It's really simple. React offers two hooks, that is use callback and use memo, that do a really simple thing. They get a dependency list that is like for the props for the memo, is a sort of observed variables, and when they change, using also shallow comparison.
It's all about shallow comparison.
Yeah, when they change, it's simply call update, in this case because it's a callback, that function, or call that function and get the new result and assign that to the variable that you have here.
This is cool. So you could potentially have a use memo that depends on the result of another use memo that depends on the result of a use callback, and so on and so forth. So
yeah, you can create cascade dependency. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's super cool.
Yeah, and for now is I think that it's all, and we can move to another interesting thing, the fragment.
So what are we breaking?
This is not about breaking stuff, but this is about avoiding building unnecessary stuff.
Okay.
For example, you have this tags container that already have a div container inside, and some dummy tags that is here. And these dummy tags also have a lot of spam, and this div that is totally unnecessary, is a waste of resources to keep it in the DOM. So I want to remove it, but if I remove it, it breaks. Okay, how can I avoid that? To avoid that, I have to use the help of fragments. And here it is, the fragments. Oh, or at least the fragment, because the tag is fragment. But you can use a short way of express and use this syntax. This is also fragment. Yeah, from a certain version of React 16 and on, this is the way of use it as a shorthand. Yeah. Okay. So if you use fragment, normally I prefer to keep the fragment at this level, and then put here and here a parenthesis, because it keeps all aligned in a clear way, so it's about readability. Yeah. But
so effectively, fragment doesn't do anything, right? It's there just to help the compiler.
Exactly, because because you cannot return multiple objects, but you have to return, okay, there are ways, nasty way to do that, but don't do that, and use fragment. Fragment is a sort of no-DOM component that groups a lot of components. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But there is a particular, also with this syntax, there is a peculiarity of the fragment that is when you use map, for example. And here is the example. Okay. When you use the map, probably all know that the components returned inside the map function must have a key. This is necessary to React to optimize the render.
I guess for caching, okay. It's all about caching.
Yeah, exactly. And when you assign a key, don't assign the index of the array, never. If you can, always try to assign a real unique ID, because you can create mess otherwise. But this is not the point. The point is that the shorthand fragment version doesn't have the option to pass the key props. So the way is that to use fragment in its full way. Here it is.
So,
Fragments.
what's next?
Next, we could touch topics like context, key props, ref prop, effects.
Yeah, but not today. We're out of time.
Okay, this was long enough, I know. Feel free to leave a comment with suggestions for topics that you would like to see covered in the next episode on React.
See you next time, folks.